Good morning. As we get started here, the number of announcements. I'm going to start with the schedule of events. The schedule of events have been changed this morning. Like he said. Voice in my ear. So because of the delayed start, we're going to start at 10 a.m. with Jaylon, 11 with Lauren Hall. Tismarian, we're going to start at noon. Then afternoon, we will have at 2 p.m. Dainty, 3 p.m. Byron, 4 p.m. Amori, and 5 p.m. Abigail. We'll have at 2 p.m. Dainty. Like riding on Amtrak where they make the announcement twice, and they often speak over the top of the other announcement. Sounds like we've killed it. Apparently that was wishful thinking. Tomorrow we will begin at 9 a.m. I'm saying this for the students' purposes, with Matthew Watkins, at 10 a.m. with Serrani, at 11 a.m. with Holly, at noon with Rory. We'll break at 1 p.m. on both days for lunch, at 2 p.m. with Andrew Cozy, at 3 p.m. Augusto, who was going to go today, at 5 p.m. We've scratched him at 5 p.m. in the first race. We're putting him in the second race tomorrow at 4 p.m., at 3 p.m. And then Alec Howerton will conclude things at 4 p.m. And then we'll do a daily wrap up both days for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then faculty, be aware that we'll do the thesis awards tomorrow evening, God willing, at 5:30 p.m. And I want to start by thanking, first thing this morning at 5 a.m. this morning, I read a text from Julie Gabrielli, who had read her texts about the delay of the university being opened up late. And she said, "How can I help?" And this is the first time in years of doing thesis where a faculty member has actually said to me, "How can I help?" It's usually, "How can I hinder?" Let's hear it for Julie. So today, joining us for reviews, and there are QR codes on the wall here. You can use your phone. You can point your camera at the QR code. There's one in front of Jaylon over here. You can pull up. I'm doing my part. I have a whole series of AI server forms making these schedules. So I'm being very environmentally friendly. Not really. At any rate, today, we also on the external reviewers, I'm going to scratch Alan Dinerman. He's going to come tomorrow in the second race tomorrow, so there's been 2 scratches. But joining us today, we have in the front row over here, John Fontillis, who is a principal with H3 Architects in New York, successor firm to Hardy Holzman Pfeiffer. Next to John is Robert Goodall. Robert is an urban design consultant, works a lot with SK&I Architects in Bethesda, longtime friend. Next to Robert is Terry Squires with GWWO in Baltimore. Great to see you here, Jerry. And then joining us, providing the parking works out for Adam Gross. Adam Gross will be joining us from Air St. Gross in Baltimore. And I did advise everybody first thing this morning to take your time getting here, so your safe arrival was more important. You'll notice that I haven't had a chance to update the program that's on the QR code, but at least it puts names and faces together so that, or names and projects together so that you can kind of follow things that way. We're going to start now with Jalan. His thesis takes us to Tokyo, where in 3 weeks' time I will be. So I'm looking forward to going there. And his chair was Jamie Tillman, accompanied by Andressa Martinez and myself. And take it on.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am happy to be here. Um, Today, I'm going to start us off with ecological performance plus human meaning equals a new way of living. And to start, I just want to thank my chair, um, Professor Tillman, Professor Martinez, and my also mentor, Balis Bogner, and along with Professor Kelly. So I started us off by how this project stemmed from my interest in Japanese culture and architecture, and how using cultural anthropology as a base can reshape regenerative design through to promote human nature relationships and restore urban landscapes. Dense cities often fail to fully integrate performance with cultural traditions, limiting the effectiveness of sustainable design. This thesis proposes a method of using cultural anthropology as a basis to create a connection and use strategies such as biophilic design, regenerative design, and natural materials to uplift the landscape and the urban environment. This architecture will embody core themes engaging with the public, blending ecology, wellness, and culture, in addition to shifting the architecture from a more passive sustainability to a more active ecological restoration. In order to do this, we have to understand place, and I have been fascinated by Japanese culture and aesthetics, and knowing Tokyo and understanding the dense tradition, its urban fabric of dense traditional and modern fabric, and its rapidly modernizing and rich multicultural history, using this as a framework, as a test bed would be excellent for this thesis. And to understand this, we look into the Japanese spatial concepts. And these concepts are really inspiring for the thesis, along with some of the design goals within the thesis. And I start us off with Ma. Ma is negative space and gaps between space. This image right here shows a torii gate, which is a gateway to a sacred space, other known as a Shinto shrine. And in this video, it shows the bamboo forest of Arishiyama Bamboo Grove in Kyoto, which I got a chance to experience while being in Japan. And it overall creates an emotional connection that resonates with the individual and the surrounding environment. Um, and it's being perceived of movement and stillness along with sound and silence. The next concept is yugen, unspoken or subtle. And it's creating a unspoken, subtle connection, leaving room for mystery. As you see in this image, the fog covers the trees, giving someone a mystery for what is at the floor, the ground floor. In addition to hashi, which is bridge and connection, creating connections that transition through spaces. along with Michiyuki, Journey Through Space and Time, and where movement becomes a form of reflection. Utaroi, Gradual Change Over Time, and Gentle Transformation of all things through time and space, season and experience. Leaving us finally at the last one concept, Shinrin Yoku, which I got to personally experience while being in Japan. This is an image from Omotesando Drive, a very commercial district, commercial street that practices forest bathing and surrounding oneself with nature, leading into the greater Tokyo. Understanding these concepts and aesthetics, we must dive into the urban city of Tokyo. Within these lights lie the site. So this is an image of the Tokyo prefecture and Shibuya, which my thesis focuses on. And zooming into the 23 special wards, showcasing Shibuya within the special wards close to Tokyo Bay, and really looking at the cityscape. So um, in this image captures the vibrant energy of active urbanism. Shibuya is known for their dense environment and uh, overall entertainment hub. And looking at imagery of what it looks like during the day and at night. And then finally diving into the site. Within Shibuya is 37 districts, and this one is a Jinguma district, and this is where the project lies. So the site is very unique. It is a large greenscape within a very dense urban fabric, and the pond, it has a very unique pond feature, and it sits in the heart of the site and has a tree buffer along the perimeter, creating a buffer from the urban cityscape to the urban greenscape. In these images, you see the dense, it has a series of buildings that have been built on the site, along with the pond and the ecology not feeling as important, um, which we'll look into that a little later. Um, and also capturing wildlife and views directed towards the site and how to show life and opportunity. But as of today, there's little of that action with the development of the site. But to understand all of this, we get into the Daimyo Garden. This image here is of a map showcasing the land that a daimyo garden once, a daimyo from the Yodo domain once owned and resided from the Inaba clan. And these are a couple sketches showcasing what the daimyo garden was with that pond feature. Leading into site maps dating back to the Edo period. Showing the clan owner, which was from the Inaba clan from 1857 to 1916, where you start to see the unique shape of the pond. Along with the form changing, subtly changing in 1928 into the Tokyo era, and the hospital development on the site. The landscape starts to change and becomes more of an urban fabric. And to finally 1999, where the pond has now shrunk and is unrecognizable from that 1916 date. Now understanding all of this, these are elements of a Japanese stroll garden featuring bridge-like elements, tsukiyamas, which are artificial hills, in addition to key aspects of bodies of water, um, also uh, relationships between people and nature. So now we look into trying to bridge that gap between history and modern time. And this project aims to restore the rich environment by using those concepts I mentioned before. And an aerial perspective of what that may look like. So understanding the site boundary is a unique shape that showcases the urban ecosystem and how that resonates on the site into primary views and circulation circulating around the site. And then analyzing sun path, understanding how light works and shadows cast on the site, and the urban retreat to a um, more rich environment, along with more analysis on how the building form is around the site. And then with the site being in a type 2 residential zone for this, for Japan, it is more of flexibility in terms of building height. And then leading into the concept. So these sketches show a Japanese niwa-ishi concept, which is a stone garden, and how the building actually resonates with the stone garden and how that resonates with the landscape. And then finally, getting into the program. So this program uses education, cultural engagement, wellness, research, and um, ecological restoration to create a living research and cultural center that creates exhibition spaces, workshops, and classrooms for visitors and workers. So the building concept creates a geometry of two masses on the first level and second level that create a seamless connection with community and enforces a learning environment on the second level to comprises of education programs for visitors, and then harmonizing that on the third level, um, joining the two masses, making a bridge, and allowing for a traditional exploration to take shape. A raised stage, which is the third level, um, creates two conditions: creating a gateway to the site and an elevated platform that looks out to the garden and the cityscape. And overall, the concept gradually scales down to create a more intimate relationship of a human scale and from the large educational buildings typologies to a more residential, smaller scale. So this floor plan shows the entry from the street side, allowing for a connection with the east-west building and creating the hashi um, that seems to blur the boundary of the exhibition spaces and the shop and cafe spaces on that first level, creating a larger um, overall floor plan. In this second level, The education spaces have a transparent view from one another and create that relationship of continued space in program. And then finally, the raised stage looking out to the garden spaces, creating, using terracing, roof terraces as a element of connection between the environment and the building. And then looking at the building from one of the ponds on the site. Um, urban, the urban garden accessibility from to the community, using along with some seating um, to oh wait, getting into the site plan, right? The site plan has a lot of treescape and garden spaces in front of the building to create a continued buffer between the street and the site, also allowing for mystery, which is the concept Yugen that I mentioned previously, um, and create urban gardens accessible to the community. And showing how that reads in section with the raised stage. And then finally, how that reads in the landscape. And the landscape in the building somewhat have a similar language, creating a harmony between the building and the landscape, stepping down in layers from that large city, large typology to a smaller typology. And then the main strategy is to use wood as much as possible, to reduce the amount of embodied carbon for the building, along with a simple design focusing on natural materials composed of timber and that would complement the organic and nature of the stroll garden landscape. In this image, the the main entry is one of the lobbies. This is one of the main entrances into the lobby space, facing the exhibition that one would experience, giving a sense of openness. And in this image showcases um, the Takubutai stage, and which means a raised stage, and it figuratively and literally shows a performance of shake, which means borrowed scenery, and using the environment as a borrowed scene for the people. Now I will take us through the stroll garden, and the stroll garden. Um, this image right here, uh, starting off with a tea house, is placed on the Tsukiyama Hill to maximize the views to the landscape. In this image, we show one of the next views looking out towards another Japanese tea house and the main pond. Smaller gardens, such as flower gardens, are incorporated within the design to help with creating different moments throughout the experience of walking through this journey. Seen in this image as well. And then framing the gate. Sunlight piercing through the trees to the ground, creating a contrast between light and dark. And then plum rain, showing the rainy seasons of Japan. And then a lower Japanese tea house placed in the way that complements the building and shows complete spatial awareness. And in this image showing Utsuroi, as I said before, change in time and experience, natural changes in colors and shapes give a keen sense of the environment. And the building's warm materials, natural materials, give the viewer a sense of warmth within the cold, beautiful landscape. And the hashi, the bridge, over the narrow section of the pond, where viewers can experience the grand miniature and grand scale of the pond. And finally, concluding back to the original image of the building. And I'd like to say thank you. Oh.
Polycast. We're being broadcast live on YouTube and on Facebook. So you might want to think about what you say. But the other thing is that for the folks at home to hear you, and sometimes maybe to hear you twice, as we were seeing earlier, you have to speak into the microphone. And this is also the only way that we can command this space acoustically, because later in the day, as students start coming in and out of the building, they will not necessarily be polite with us. So, Jilan, sorry for me for interrupting. And if somebody would like to begin.
Yes.
Hey, Jalen, how do you feel you did on this? It's been a long time, right?
Yeah, it was quite the experience, trying to create a relationship between the building and the landscape. It took a lot of research to understand Japanese stroll gardens, Japanese contemporary and traditional architecture, and how to create a seamless connection between the two, um, and trying to restore what was lost for today.
And did you visited the site or?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what did you feel like when walking around the site? Because I'll tell you, there's a huge scale difference
Yeah,
between the commercial district and the residential buildings there.
yeah, it is. It's an it's actually quite crazy when walking around the area. I felt in the residential um, side of the site, it felt very quiet. But as you proceeded to walk towards those large scale buildings, the sense of the environment changed and shifted, and it felt like the site was in the in between, and like really the quiet. It felt very quiet as soon as you approached. And I'll walk over here. As soon as you start to approach this part of the street, um, it really started to feel very quiet. And then as you got to this end, um, it started to pick up in pace. But within the site, it is very, it has that the sense of quietness.
It's interesting because I just looking at the drawings and looking at your presentation, the site seems like something that you were so entranced by, and it looks like a lot of effort in the gardens. The stroll garden is the focus of the project. I think the buildings are interesting in the sense that I guess looking at the historic aspect, the hospital was over here on the west side, right?
Yes,
And so you really were looking to use the building as a demarcation between the commercial and the
correct.
residential to shield it.
Yes. So my main idea for this project was the building would act as that urban retreat, right? For the landscape. And also it kind of, what it does is create that enclosure, right? But the hashi, the main um, space between the two, is that connecting piece, right? Between the urban and the landscape.
I think that is a great way to transition. I guess I would have liked to see a view from that point. I mean, you see a little bit here on this view up here,
Right.
and you see it from there. But I would have liked to have seen something experiencing that
Mm,
like the tour gate that you showed earlier. What
right.
it's like to be in that transition,
Mm,
because then I think it would been a much more compelling thing to understand.
mm,
How what you're leaving behind, and then strolling into this place that is really kind of an oasis
right.
in the middle of everything. Um, I think the garden is fantastic. I think there's some elements to there, and honestly, I think you must have been really excited to to do all those trees,
Yeah.
and explore the water feature. Um, I guess I would question the amount of glass if something that's ecological. I mean, if it is being viewed to the garden, yes, that's great. But
Mhm,
looking at these facades, I don't see it as being particularly ecological because there's so much
mhm,
energy that's being transmitted through those glass pieces.
mhm.
But I mean, I think it's a I think I understand the idea that you're trying to create that refuge
Yeah.
overlook. Um, but I mean, do you think you achieved what you were trying to start out in terms of embodying those Japanese concepts in the building design?
Yes, so the building, as I said before, uses mainly wood construction. Traditional Japanese architecture really resides with wood construction and wood joinery. Um, the building, I tried hard to use mainly wood. Some aspects use a little bit of steel because of the spanning, um, but I do think that I achieved that aspect of creating a more contemporary Japanese architecture. Um, in terms of, to your point about the glazing, because the building is northern faced, right? It doesn't get an extreme amount of direct sunlight, so um, the energy, I'm sure the energy consumption is not extremely high from that point of the building.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you've done a lot of work, and I enjoyed the presentation. Uh, I was floored, I will tell you, to learn that this was a wood frame building,
Mm,
because it doesn't look like a wood frame building at all.
mm,
I don't think.
mm,
I look at uh, the the width of the floors, or what I take to be the representation of the floor on the wall. You get a little bit more structure in here, but
yeah.
why doesn't any of that? Why doesn't the wood frame appear on the facades at all?
Mm,
And when it was suggested that the building doesn't look like a wood frame building from its elevations,
right.
that's absolutely correct. You,
Mm,
you even you look at the way cantilevers are made, you look at the way spans are made, you look at
right.
the way the glass is made.
Mm,
All of that, uh, you know, wants, I think, expression of the wood frame and the traditional Japanese architecture that you're talking about. I think that would have made a more convincing representation of that. I think.
mm,
And and then I go to you know some of the decisions that you made. You push the building back from the edge.
mhm,
Is do we understand the building to be situated within the garden, or do we understand the building to be really the gateway to the garden?
mm,
And what is the meaning of all of that
mm,
if the building is a gateway to the garden?
mm,
What is the meaning of this as part of the garden?
mm,
How the building's relationship to the garden is, you know, I don't know that it's figured out that well. You know, even back here, what is the relationship of the building to the garden here? You know, where exactly do I enter the garden? Is this the gate? Is this the gate? You know, what is the meaning of the building's relationship to the garden? I think that, you know, if the building sits in the garden, that's one thing. If it sits on the edge of the garden, that's something else. And then I guess I wish the way that the plan was made would, or the way the graphic of the plan is made.
Okay.
I wish you could read the spaces more. You know, the trees are could clump and shape spaces better. You know, there's a lot of effort put on each individual tree, when I think clumping the trees could help shape the spaces a little bit more. You know, the graphic of the garden could be more spatial.
Okay.
I think.
Jelon, hi, Jelon.
How you doing, Professor
Good.
Bell?
You've gone to some effort to make a distinction between the main body of the building and this piece on top.
Right.
Which kind of pushes out on one side and pushes up. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? Like, for example, we get these exposed, you know, columns over here and some beams on the city. Is that the city side? Or that's the garden side? That's the garden side.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then we have this little space right here, right, which presumably has trusses show up here, but they don't seem to show up anyplace else. But can you talk a little bit about what this piece is doing relative to everything else?
Yeah, so in that piece, this element, it's supposed to act as the raised stage, because of the thought of creating a performance space, right? A multi-purpose performance space that relates to the landscape. Um, I try to raise it a little bit to create the sense of hierarchy, and using that as the element of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Trying to create that overall, I guess, just trying to create the hierarchy for the space.
Because, okay, fair enough. Because I thought my reaction to it was you were trying to distinguish this piece as a gateway. Is that's the piece that's spanning that makes the gate
Hmm.
there, and it's a little uncomfortable. It has a very ambiguous relationship to everything else that's built around it, and so I guess I end up wondering, would there have been a way to make it much more emphatic as its own piece? That's one question. Second is, when I'm sitting here in front of this picture right here, the autumn picture,
Hmm.
and then the summer picture there, and I noticed these sliding panels on
Yes.
the wall there, which I don't know too much about Japanese architecture, but and even this garden perspective, but I do think, as much as I know, there is a sort of interest in inside outside relationships that can be changed based upon the wall of the building. You can open
Right.
them up and slide them up.
Mhm.
Can you do that anywhere in your building? Can you do that? Is that experience possible
Um,
anywhere in your building?
I didn't get to explore that.
Okay, so that would be something I think that would be more aligned with your sort of genus loci interest in Japanese architecture, that
Mhm.
people have commented on these big glass walls. It seems to me that some of them actually could have been either semi-opaque and moved so that people could have access to these terraces and you could move around a little bit more, and they could be adjustable vis-a-vis the climate. You know, maybe sometimes there's a whole system whereby if the sun is too strong, they could block off the sunlight and things like that, that you would develop kind of a taxonomy of facade elements that could allow you to respond that way,
Right.
which I think would be really helpful.
Mhm.
Hi,
Hi.
I want to compliment you on your research. It really was fascinating, and thanks, because I learned a lot today about Japanese principles. And I think leaning into those principles for the rest of your design career will probably serve you very well.
Thank you.
The one, they were all so wonderful, but one of them that really fascinated me was the one about the sense of mystery.
Yes.
Not sure I know how to pronounce it.
Yugen?
Thank you.
Yes.
And so in your scheme, both in the landscape design and the building design, the avenue it appears you took is kind of a showcase, right? Showcasing all of this very ambitious program that you've provided so many different things to your community through this program. They would all be wonderful additions um, to the community. But going back to that sense of mystery in terms of something to continue to explore in your own career.
Mhm.
What if the stage element were a discovery in the garden instead of the showcase that it is, which is kind of the crowning, piece to your building?
Right.
And because you have a garden that's a pair with your building,
Mhm.
as you go forward in your career, I think you could explore kind of the opposite thing. It's always a good idea to explore two different, or even three different ways of solving a problem, right? To just enrich the final solution.
Mhm.
So another exploration point would be to do just that, would be to take your program elements and rather than gather them as a showcase, but rather integrate them throughout the garden and create that sense of mystery and discovery as you stroll through the garden and come upon these program elements. So just another thought, and I agree with um, my fellow juror with the landscape design, which of course is next level to your architecture
Yeah.
thesis, but I'm sure you'll really enjoy working with landscape architects throughout your career.
Mhm.
But creating view corridors from the surrounding corridor into the site
Mhm.
and creating elements of discovery and mystery from the community going into the site as well and shaping the landscape,
Right.
as was previously mentioned, to discover your programmatic elements. So I think even in the design of the garden right now, it's very much that you can sit somewhere and sort of survey the whole garden, which is lovely and wonderful. But something to explore in the future is rather a sense of wayfinding and discovery, so that there's always a view shed that's leading you around the next corner. And of course, that has to be balanced with security in an urban environment
Right.
and, visibility into every area, but that can partner with the view sheds coming in from the city as well.
Mhm.
So just another idea of layering.
Okay.
And then I think that can be applied to the interior design as well.
Okay.
Just a sense of discovery and a sense of layering. Um, and, that's just sort of the next, it's always with a thesis commentary, it's always if you were to continue
Yeah.
working on the project, right? Which of course
Yeah.
you're on to your career next. But
Mhm.
I really appreciate how much research you did and how you tried so hard to incorporate those elements. Um, from something overseas and tackling this whole extra level of design by incorporating the cultural traditions of another architecture. Well
Yeah.
done.
Thank you.
Well, I'm part of this committee, then I know your process and your progress. Then first of all, congratulations, because I know how your was your last weeks. And first, I really think that your massing is showing the Japanese principles. However, I believe that you could expose the wood frame more. And not only as a traditional element, but how contemporary architects are also using them. For example, Su Fujimoto, Toyohiro, Shigeru Ban, like they are using the wood not only as a frame, but also framing the space. The program is flexible. The panels also create like different hierarchies in the space.
Right.
They're also using this for shading device, creating some like transitional space, outdoors, indoors, and like there's so much many opportunities,
Right.
and I feel that you're missing this part. So as a transition, it's not a transition from the new city or contemporary city and the old time,
Mm.
but also what is being a Japanese architecture, contemporary one that is revisiting or revising the same principles they had before. And
Mhm.
some architects can give you this clue, like
Yeah.
I feel the precedents are something you could look at
Right.
to enhance your design, especially the elevations, the facade,
Mm.
and bring the wood frame not only as a structure but also part of your architectural language.
Mm. Mhm. I agree.
Hi,
How you
I'm
doing?
Adam Gross with Air St. Gross. Sorry I'm a little
Nice to
late.
meet you.
Um, So, a couple of quick questions. Is the upper part of the landscape, is there a wall there? As I look at the perspective, it looks like, so how do you get into this garden? Is there
Yeah,
only one way in and the
there's
rest
only
is
one
walled
way
off?
in. So this is the only way in. There's a retaining wall around the garden, existing retaining wall, that closes most of the garden out from the public. And tearing that, if to tear that retaining wall down, would cause a lot of issues um, due to topography
So there's an existing retaining wall?
existing.
Uh-huh, okay.
Mhm.
And can you talk a little bit about this? You spent a lot of time thinking obviously about the garden itself, about the edge of the design as it hits these other streets and buildings to the south.
Oh,
Yeah, like what's going on there? Why is all that paving there? And how are you seeing someone if they're walking down the street? How do they walk
so
into the building?
because of the tree line connected from the existing tree line, it creates that like that barrier between inside and outside. Um, this element, this main paving right here, was for people to sit and have relax in front of the building. There's gallery spaces facing that part of the building, along with cafe and some other program spaces. And by having that in the front of the building, it creates that seamless connection between the people on the outside and the people on the inside.
So the function on the right-hand building of all that open space
Mhm.
that circles the core, that's all exhibition?
Yes, so mainly all of this is exhibition
Mhm.
space.
And the cafe is on that other corner at
Correct.
where the chairs are?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of interconnected thoughts. This school has long um, talked about the classic and the romantic. Have you heard those phrases
Yes,
about
I have.
planning?
Mhm.
And I think what's fascinating about this project is you have a very kind of classical,
Mm.
contemporary, rectilinear form,
Mhm.
and then a more romantic, looser garden.
Right.
And I am less comfortable with the two being so distinctly different.
Mm.
Then there may have been some more subtle ways to blend the two.
Mm.
It
Okay.
almost seems like the garden was already there, and then you came in 10 years later and
Mm.
designed this contemporary building and set
Mm.
it on the site. Now, that may have been a conscious decision on your part, but it doesn't, it still seems to me that there could have been a little bit more integration, not just with the building and the landscape, but also with the whole design and the neighborhoods. I mean, I
Mm.
wish that wall wasn't up there, and there might be the possibility for people to kind of move in from those streets and enjoy the garden.
Mm.
Um, the other thing that is so wonderful about these types of programs, museums, visitor centers,
Right.
libraries, is the idea of threshold and sequence.
Mm.
And again, you've chosen not to create much of a threshold, so you can just go right through, as
Mm.
opposed to having something in your design that causes you to pause,
Mm.
go left or right into one of these two buildings.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I think is nice but could have been more dramatic is your big stair, and how your big stair creates this sequence that goes up to the third floor, and how that could have been a little bit more grand
Mm.
and open. I don't, did you look at other buildings of this type? And if so, can you remember
Yeah.
some of them more?
I looked at mainly I looked a lot at Kengo Kuma's work.
Mhm.
And his most of his work, some of his work had a spiral stair, and along with just a linear stair. And then because of this, one of the masses of my building was more rectilinear. I chose to do a more linear type of staircase.
And when you come through that portal, that passage, are there stairs there?
Within this passage?
No,
Oh,
yeah, you're right there.
right here. Yes, a stepping down into the landscape.
So if I'm in a wheelchair, what do I do?
Um, it's quite interesting. When I was there, I didn't see anybody in wheelchairs. So I didn't initiate putting a ramp in there, but that's something I could have explored.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made. I think, you know, Adam's lens of looking at it from a classical or romantic landscape. My questions about this kind of garden and building project, I would look at it more from a scale perspective. To me, it seems like you've just moved the urban edge north 1/3 of the way into the garden. You know, you made those other garden buildings, the small garden buildings up on the north side, right?
Correct.
And you made these buildings on the south side, and their scale and their orientation is really quite large, right? So to me, the garden in a way starts on the north side of your big buildings. And if they had been maybe a little smaller, there had been some rotation or figural presence of them within the garden, I think that could have furthered the big goals of the thesis. And then I agree completely with Rob's comments on the wood construction. In the big perspective, you've used the kind of, we see the tail end of one beam near the stair opening, right?
Yeah.
And most new mass timber buildings, the benefit of mass timber is that you can see all that stuff. So you've created this kind of soffit that's concealing it all, but then you've made a big opening for that stair to descend through with no vertical expression of columns that are going to be picking up all of the tail ends of those beams that are making that opening. You know, so there's, I think, a kind of an opportunity there to resolve some of that stuff.
So just real quick to build on Peter's point, I mean, when I looked at this, I thought, is this a building that's in the garden?
Oh,
Surrounded by the garden like your pavilions are? Or is it a building that's trying to define the edge of the garden?
so it defines the edge, but it's also within. So this is also part of the garden on either side. So it's within the garden.
John, I very much appreciate the completeness of your enterprise here and the analysis of the Japanese architecture. I think one of the things that is true about this project that I think is true in general is the project is modern, is very modern. I think what you're hearing is it could be more Japanese.
Okay.
It has a kind of Miesian aesthetic to it, which is what people do these days, I suppose. But unfortunately, but if the project was actually a little bit, even a little bit more Japanese, and still had a kind of minimalist aesthetic, I think it would be quite a bit more successful in terms of the overhangs, in terms of the movable panels, in terms of the interior exterior relationships. I'm still uncomfortable with the way this top piece is perched on top of everything else. I don't know that that's been resolved very well, or the expression of the wood there. And it seems to me that Japanese architecture lends itself very well to that intersection of a kind of minimalist aesthetic, the revealing of technology and inside-outside relationships, you know. So pushing it more in that direction, I think probably would have helped you make something that was more appropriate to the setting and perhaps solve the problems that people have identified.
Okay.
And Professor Bell, I think just to clarify that could be embracing more Japanese tectonics, not necessarily making it look like a Japanese restaurant that you might see out someplace in Montgomery County.
Right.
That's not what it's not a stylistic thing. It's
Right.
really a thing about principle.
Okay, so I'm the chair. I get to speak last. So Jalan, I want to compliment you on this moment. This is your moment.
Thank
This
you.
is your threshold,
Thank
right? And you've accomplished a great deal to get here, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
So I think you had a very robust discussion of the concept, the tectonics. I take all of that to heart. However, um, for me, what you're attempting to do with this project and the themes that you have unleashed for you, and I believe there was a reference to a career trajectory here, and I very much subscribe to that. You have opened up such a rich um, series of concepts for you going forward that I'm really looking forward to seeing how you progress.
Thank you.
To me, you know, the question is, what does the thesis add up for you? And I personally believe that there is a very, very strong concept here. In terms of the architecture, in an interesting way, and I come back to your winter view, I see the architecture being fairly deferential, and I'm not sure that, you know, you really gave people a view of the urban context around there, but I was really pleased with some of your other views, and some of the other views that you showed were really effective. So
Thank you.
I want to congratulate you again. It's been great working with you for 3 semesters.
Yeah.
Um, and best of luck as you go forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's been fun. It's been fun watching this, planning to go to Japan in January. We're gonna all get up. You might want to take your chairs with you, otherwise you might not have anything to sit on. And we're gonna rotate 90 degrees. We're gonna face this wall here, where Lauren is going to take us to Washington, D.C.
Oh, thank you, sir. He's like, and well, 12 out of 10. That's so good. I was all yeah. Scale is crazy. Yeah. Thank you.
You have the next PowerPoint.
Yeah. You do. I do.
I mean, the one after hers.
Oh, that
I do not.
No.
That's
Send that without an email.
I know. Doesn't respond to that. She does. She responds to everything. So as we're waiting here, Adam Gross introduced himself when he arrived, just for those of you back there. Principal Emeritus at Air St. Gross, now free agent to the world. So, no, well, this next project takes us to Washington, D.C., in the vicinity of Howard University. Lauren Hall will be presenting. Her committee consisted of Peter Wilson as chair. Where's Peter? Peter was here a moment. Oh, there he is right there. And next to him, Georgianne Matthews and myself. And Lauren, go ahead and take it away. Appreciate it.
All right. Imagine you're a 14-year-old in Washington, D.C. School is out. You're not exactly ready to go home yet, but the streets are no place for a child to be roaming after school. Where do you go? What does the city have to offer you? The occasional basketball court, a room with folding tables and a sign that says game room, a recreation center that looks good on a brochure but has no real soul, no real identity, and no real role in your development. My name is Lauren Hall, and I have an extensive background working with youth as a middle school teacher, as an after school enrichment program coordinator, a summer camp director, among others. My time in these roles, especially in the middle school classroom, showed me just how deeply the built environment affects our young people. I observed how their surroundings affected their behavior, their confidence, and even their sense of identity. Over the time, I began to realize something important, that many of the challenges that young people face are not always due to their personal shortcomings. At times, they're the environmental responses. This inspired my exploration of the effect of the built environment on youth well-being and delinquency. Washington, D.C. is facing an increase in crime rates, especially since COVID. This is due to teens that lack that space to go to after school. They lack guidance. They're lacking that support system that they're needed. Most recently, if you've been watching the news, a 12-year-old girl just got arrested as the prime suspect in a multi-crime robbery spree in Northeast Washington, D.C. One might prematurely judge this child and call her troubled. But on the other perspective, crimes like these, they require confidence, they require coordination, they require risk taking, they require leadership skills that, if used in another context, would be directed towards something positive. So the issue isn't that these young people lack potential, it's not that they're inherently bad children, it's that they lack spaces where they can channel their energy into something meaningful. In order to explore this, I went back to my alma mater, Howard University Middle School of Mathematics and Science on Howard University's campus. I held a 2-day design workshop, both 1.5 hours each, with 20 scholars, about a half and half mix of gentlemen and young ladies. In this workshop, I introduced architecture to them because this is the same school that introduced architecture to me. We also talked about what third places are. We evaluated different spaces in DC about how they made them feel just by looking at the pictures. We also did some design exercises where they got to tell me what they thought their third space would look like. Something interesting about this workshop was I asked them to tell me at the beginning what their favorite place was outside of school. I was so surprised and a little bit underwhelmed by all of their answers. Majority of them said their room or Chick-fil-A or Chipotle or something along those lines. Only 2 out of the 20 kids gave me an actual third place that they like to enjoy. And both of those third places were places that they can only go with their parents. So aside from discussing the built environment, learning about third places, and evaluating the effectiveness of space, we also did a design activity where they designed their third space. From this activity and from discussing with them, I learned a few things. They needed belonging and purpose. They needed spaces that provided flexibility and spaces that supported their formation of identity, autonomy, and social connection. And they do not feel like DC has any third spaces for them to do that currently. For those who don't know, a third place is a place outside of one's home and one's school. So that's a very integral time for a child, that time before they go home and after they get out of school. A lot of kids, they tend to just go to the streets and get into risky behaviors, not because, again, they're bad, but because peer pressure is a normal thing at that age. Looking at Edgewood Recreation Center, this is an example of a third place in DC. It's in a trouble. Some would say a troubled neighborhood. And aesthetically, it's a beautiful building. It has clean lines, colorful panels, modern materials. But outside of the aesthetics, does it evoke the intangible qualities of the space it claims to be, which is a recreation center? I purposefully put these photos in black and white so that you can look past the colorful band-aids that they put and really decide if this space really evokes what it's supposed to be. For example, this is the waiting room. In black and white, without the colorful chairs and the photos on the wall, you would not know if that was a hospital waiting room or if that was a recreation center or even a nursing home at that. Similarly, on the opposite side, we have the St. James in Springfield, Virginia. Granted, this is a suburban lot. It's in an industrial area, but even without the extra aesthetic qualities and elements, this space evokes what it's intended to do. It evokes opportunity. It evokes energy. It evokes the type of behaviors that you think that you would want people to do in this space. Moving on, look, this is a map of all of the recreation centers and community centers in Washington, D.C. So this thesis is not saying that there's a lack of recreation center because as we can see on this map, that's simply not the case. So it's not a problem of access. I believe it's a problem of community engagement, architectural responsiveness to the target communities, and the perceived identity of the spaces, just like we saw in Edgewood. So then that led me to the question, how can third places cultivate well-being and opportunity for youth in urban communities? This question's not going to be answered just by architecture. It requires a multi-perspectival solution, one that looks at psychology, sociology, outreach to students, and architecture as one. When looking at environmental psychology, you're looking at things about how light and visibility affect spaces. It's about how spatial legibility and predictability affect one's feelings of safety in the building, how choice and autonomy in space directly impact adolescent well-being. So from this perspective, architecture cannot fix social problems alone, but it can change the conditions that produce them. So for this thesis, we are focusing on the Shaw neighborhood. The Shaw neighborhood is the perfect place to test out this because it's in the central quadrant of DC. It's right north of the White House and the National Mall. It's right near Howard University. It's in a prime area where youth from all over the four quadrants can come to this common ground. And it's also easily accessible by public transportation, which was another plus. Another thing about the Shaw neighborhood, it's on Georgia Avenue, which is a major artery in the city. Um, Also, it's near the U Street corridor, which has a rich history of retail and civic and just cultural landmarks, even such as Ben's Chili Bowl. Also, Shaw neighborhood is home to Howard University. If anybody knows about Howard, they take pride in nurturing professionals and um, just people who want to make a difference in the world. Again, I went to this middle school, so I was able to experience this firsthand for 3 whole years of my life. And lastly, Shaw neighborhood has a lot of cultural landmarks, such as the Howard Theater, which was the first theater open to African Americans legally in the United States. What do all of these things have in common? This is a common theme that we're going to talk about in this presentation is identity. I feel like the reason why some of the third spaces in DC are failing at what they're supposed to do is because they lack identity. Again, they're a band-aid solution to an open wound, and that's not going to help our youth. Moving on to our site. Our site is located across from Howard University and adjacent to Banneker Recreation Center, which is up there. Um, this site currently is being used as parking lot. It is currently 7 lots put together, all owned by Howard University. One is used for the current McDonald's that's on the site, and the rest of it is just used for parking. Some of the benefits of using this site, again, is it's on Georgia Avenue, a major artery, which means it's easy to get to. There is a bus line that runs, there's about 3 or 4 stops just in this view right here for the bus, and it's right near Howard Shaw. Secondly, it's located in a heavily civic zone. There are so many schools in this area. Howard University being a secondary location. Then we have the old Banneker High School. We have Cardoza High School. We have the Howard Hospital. And then we also have some middle schools like Garnett Patterson, which is on U Street, and Myers Elementary, which is now a bilingual school. So even with all of these civic spaces, it also contributes to a diverse youth population. We get a lot of young adults at Howard, and then we get a diverse population of African American, Caucasian, and Latino students throughout this area as well. So this makes this the perfect spot to make a proposal that's kind of a melting pot for all students to come. These are some photos of the site just to orient you. This is the McDonald's when you're standing at the corner of Berry Place Northwest looking at the site. This is the rear of the site. And the photo number 9 is again looking into the parking lot where majority of the site will be taking place. Some points of interest for this site. One is to utilize Bryant Street Northwest to create an east-west civic axis. We have a strong northwest axis created by Georgia Avenue. I think it would be valuable to create that east-west axis to connect the LaDroit neighborhood all the way over to the U Street neighborhood. Secondly, we have a 14-foot elevation change between the edge of the site and the Banneker Recreation Center. This gives opportunity to create some type of pedestrian overpass that not only acts as a landmark or a wayfinding element on Georgia Avenue, but also connects the new site to Banneker's existing site. And lastly, when I visited the site recently, all of the food items were all closed on that strip right there. They've all been closed or moved to new places. So right now, this is technically almost a food desert. Those students, all they have right now is Whole Foods. There are some smaller mom and pops on the northern side of the site, but since we're focusing right here, this main strip right here currently has no food. So then that brings the point of trying to revitalize that dying food network that was on Georgia Avenue. To respond to this issue, I developed a framework grounded in environmental psychology and utilizing the Journal of Adolescents' Health and Well-Being Indicators. My design strategy uses 3 pillars: architecture as an affirmation, architecture as empowerment, and architecture as opportunity. Architecture's affirmation encompasses spaces that allow youth to see themselves, express themselves, and feel culturally represented. Architecture as empowerment focuses on autonomy and safety by creating clear, predictable paths where students and flexible environments that balance supervision with freedom. And lastly, architecture as opportunity, which has to do with the types of spaces that are offered to these students. With that, I present to you the Mary M. Bethune Enrichment Center. The goal of this center is to be a city within the city. It's to be a one-stop shop for students and young people and older people or whoever the users are at the time. And looking at the massing, it starts off as a rectilinear block. We are then carving out a circular void between the 2 blocks to make it look like there are 2 separate buildings. Those 2 separate buildings then connect below grade to create one seamless transition from one building to the next. Also, the site has a jog at that intersection where the circular part is. It's about a 4.5-degree jog. And this created an opportunity to test plan north versus true north. So you'll see in the plans that we are kind of grappling, trying to do both in one singular building. So the program, we have a very, very diverse program because again, one of the main pillars is opportunity. So we want to provide as many types of spaces as possible. So from using the indicators of well-being in the Journal of Adolescent Health, we came up with these 6 program zones. Each of these zones connect directly to one or more of the indicators of well-being. And that was basically my checklist of trying to check if I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Looking at some of the key spaces in the building, we have an aesthetic studio where people can learn how to do hair, nails, do facials, eyelashes. We also have a teaching kitchen where we can do um, different type of events, also teaching classes. We have resource centers and we also have a culinary hall in this building. Again, we're trying to revitalize that dying food network. So this building is going to be key in doing that. The thing about this building though, is it's not your typical food hall where we're having Chipotle and Chick-fil-A and Qdoba. It's, it's specifically for small businesses. It's specifically for the community. So think of it this way. You learn how to cook in here, you open your own business here. It has that connection of growth. It is basically like you're seeing your future in this next building. Onto the second floor, we have things like the Dominique Dawes Gymnastics Center. We have the bioathletic courts. We have the learning labs and learning studios. These spaces are flexible to hold many types of different learning, focused learning and individual learning. It's important to provide that spectrum of space types to create that autonomy because I don't want to be prescriptive in these spaces. I want to guide them, but I don't want to tell them how to use these spaces. So this gives them that flexibility. On the third floor, we have the remaining of the athletic center, which again focuses on boxing gyms. We also have a women's only gym for people who just need privacy. And then we have a plethora of fitness studios that can hold cycling classes, yoga classes, Pilates, again, providing that opportunity and flexibility to do whatever you need with the space. And then of course, we have our admin offices who support the entire building and a large event space that was purposefully left long and open because you are able to block it off with partitions such as we have in here and create whatever type of space you need. Also going down to the basement, again, we have our Bradley Beal Athletic Center with our indoor turf field, our multi-courts, and we also have our batting cages in the back. We also have items such as our Chuck Brown music producing studio. We have our artist labs, and we also have our photography studios. Secondly, we have in the middle our teen lounge. And neighboring our teen lounge, we have a retreat, which has quiet pods for people who need to get away. They are able to go into this space and get quiet time. We also have game rooms that accommodate for VR. It accommodates for group gaming. It also accommodates for singular gaming. Again, we're trying to create that flexibility for people to choose how they want to use the spaces. And then we also have an underground cafe called District Underground, just to also continue that food market into the basement as well. How am I testing and checking if I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing, intending to do? I'm looking at the domains from the indicators of well-being, and I'm also deciding what spaces and what features have I included that are telling me that I'm actually doing this. This was my checklist to say, okay, this is safety. So when I do bring this back to my focus group students and they look at this, I can compare my analysis to their analysis of if I'm actually doing what I intended to do. Okay. And then going back to our 3 pillars, just showing how are we even implementing these 3 pillars into the design. First, we're looking at architecture as affirmation. Affirmation can be seen in the many murals that are along the entire building. It's also involved in the socio-pedal nature of some of these spaces where community is heavily driven. This is one of the indoor basketball courts with the turf field behind it. I even put these into AI just to see, without all of the decoration as a black and white image, what would AI do without any prompts or anything me telling it? What would it spit out? And this is pretty spot on to kind of the energy and the vibe of the space that I think would go in the Bradley Bill courts. Secondly, we have architecture as empowerment. This is our gallery. This is a blank canvas for people to add their story in DC. I've kind of added my story, but it's time for people to also add their story. Again, similar to the last one, I added it into AI to see what would you give me as this gallery if I give you this blank space with no prompt. And this is the image that it gave me. Lastly, we also have architecture as opportunity. We want to give these kids things that they may not have known was possible. When I was in middle school, I didn't know about architecture, but when I joined the architecture club, now I'm here, and that's because of opportunity. So I'm trying to pass on that same opportunity that I had to these kids. I've had so many opportunities, and it has changed the trajectory of my life, and I think that all kids should be afforded that. All people should be afforded that. So then, in conclusion, this thesis demonstrates how architecture can move beyond shelter and become a tool for affirmation, empowerment, and opportunity. It centers youth identity, it encourages agency, and it creates visible pathways to growth. And this building tries to reframe architecture as an active force in shaping confident, capable futures. It acts as a shift from temporary fixes to long-term empowerment. It acts as going from band-aid solutions to real solutions and from passive space to active well-being. Thank you, and I look forward to your feedback and your questions.
That's the one too. Nothing. In addition to, I don't know, it just goes dead. This is the Roman Catholicism coming out in me. I've just blessed all of you. Now, in addition to using the microphone, before you wish to speak, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. There we go.
So Adam Gross. I've been on a lot of juries for years and years. I've never had someone present who I wanted to not stop presenting. That was amazing. Totally amazing. There's a long list of people who went to architecture school and ended up not necessarily doing architecture. One of my favorite examples is Janet Marie Smith, who has redone 50% of the baseball stadiums in America. Not 50%, but 30%. So I think what you've shown us is an extraordinarily powerful image presented so professionally that I could see you taking any kind of career path you wanted to take, whether it's just as an architect or any number of other fields that I could imagine you're getting involved with. So I'd like to talk to you more offline about a number of things that I'm involved with in Baltimore. And I'll leave it there. Just with my architecture juror hat on for a sec, this presentation would really be help if you were to explain those sections a little bit. I did get a little lost in terms of following the program with your floor plans and everything else. And also having your principles over there and kind of making sure by your color coding that you're following through and achieving those principles was another fantastic example of the presentation.
Well, I want to echo everything that Adam just said. I think that your methodology of research in speaking to students and the questions that you devised for them and the exercises, I think you could probably teach some lessons to many of our civic um, uh, leaders, thank you, who are continually trying to find ways to productively engage the public in terms of making public architecture meaningful and contributing to our environment positively. And I think that you have developed some ways that were very effective. So I compliment you on that. I think this is it goes far beyond a rec center or a community center. I'm not sure what the proper word to describe it is. Your title is very motivating, but I think it's really, really designed to do exactly what you very passionately described, which is to provide a sense of belonging and opportunity. So huge compliments to you on that, especially for your programmatic development and the methodology you use to get there. Um, I echo Adam because I think that your voice would be very useful in even outside of the field of architecture, but just in how to make public architecture useful to the community in a meaningful way. So I do encourage you to explore ways to do that, even if you continue on as an architect, that, as a volunteer, what have you. I am intrigued by your architecture, and I would like to hear a little bit more about it because I think there are some interesting choices you made with the roof forms, et cetera. That would be good to hear more about, but I think it's interesting that you chose not to speak about that, but you chose instead to speak so beautifully about how you got to where you got. The last comment I want to make, although I could speak to you for a lot longer. I would really like to have a conversation with you after as well. But is your use of AI, I think not because I want to discourage the use of AI, but I think I would have been very interested to see what you would have come up with. In terms of finishes, et cetera, that would have enriched the program elements. I think, AI, I'm not sure, like, we don't know right now, right, what AI is using as a logic for its choices, right? So, but you have already developed such a deep analysis of what the community that you're designing for needs and wants, that really it should not be AI with its mystical choice making, but it should be you, the designer, who already has thought a great deal. In fact, your analysis about some pre-existing community centers, right, and how they actually feel. I think this is a problem that architects and designers everywhere are desperately trying to solve over and over again, which is how to make the spaces responsive, which is a word that you used, how to make architecture and design responsive to the identity of the community. That is a perplexing question for designers. It will always be a perplexing question that is fun to try and work on. That's one of the things we all love about the field. But I think here, you know, I would have loved to see what you did with that. If you were to continue designing this project, I would want to see what interiors you came up with. So there's that. And I could keep talking, but I will pass. Beautiful, beautiful presentation and very well presented as well.
Hi. The presentation was amazing. Yeah, thanks a lot. And clearly there's a great deal of energy and passion on the wall here. And I commend you for that also. You know, I live up near Tenleytown, and you know, now my exercise routine is to walk through there all the time, and so I see a lot of American university students, and there's a high school right there, so there's a lot of high school kids around, and things like that. And Chick-fil-A is there along with a whole bunch. There's a whole string there of little eateries, you know, one-off eateries. You know, it's kind of a nice little thing, and the CVS is there, and you know, there's a lot of young kids there. So it's not the U Street corridor, which I can imagine is better, but it's a little neighborhood version of that. And so, you know, I think about the third place, and clearly each one of these things is a third place, and they all have seating out in front and all of that. And it's small in scale, and it's neighborhood oriented, and it embraces the street. Okay. So I look at this, and you know, your comments about the character of some of the other rec facilities was a little bit cold to you, and you know, maybe a little bit corporate or something like that. And I'm thinking about the scale of this and the scale of that and the character of this and the character of that. And I'm wondering a number of things. Okay. Uh, One is, why doesn't the building embrace the street a lot more? You know, I look at this, and there's no streetscape energy to it, you know, that is really going to interact with Georgia Avenue in the neighborhood. I know there's a playground to the south, and there's this amphitheater in the middle, but listening to you made me think of something that was completely different than this. You know, it made me think of a bunch of little spaces. You know, I mean, why do these kids gravitate to Chick-fil-A and these other places? Because they're intimate, right? They're seating for 20 people, not seating for how many people are involved in this building on a daily basis? A lot. Is that the place to really go and be and have your identity reinforced, you know, and to meet your group and interact with your group and have an intimate setting? I guess I want something that's intimate, you know, rather than very large. And from your narrative, I would have seen, you know, maybe a number of neighborhood centers, you know, not one big neighborhood center. I don't know, you know, I mean, this isn't, I'm just listening to you and trying to figure out, you know, the relationship between what you made and what you said, you know, and is there a congruence there? And that's really all I think.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback.
No, it's wonderful. Is it, you know, if you thought about that, is it what you wanted to make? I think it's such a great question. Make something big and small.
Can you make something big, or make big program elements feel intimate?
Yeah.
And feel smaller?
And yes. See.
Yeah.
A lot of energy and passion, you know, and a lot of great ideas.
I see a lot of opportunity for that in the plan. I think the street side comment and back to the previous comment about your architecture and, where your passion truly lies. But I think within the plan, you have the beginnings of creating some of those spaces, and you mentioned some of them. I think where the community comes together in the center is a fascinating discussion and would have been wonderful if you would have had time. I mean, I realize this could go on forever, but to see how that would have been recognized and how the interior streetscape of those individual spaces that you have created in plan, how those form an interior streetscape and how someone finds their place. You wrote wayfinding as one of your goals and that sort of sense of identity. And in such a large complex, which has an amazing programmatic set of opportunities for occupants, how does someone find that? And, what is the wayfinding that you designed around? And we could be here all day discussing that. So, but I think it's a wonderful perceptive comment. And I think you've really made strides toward it inside.
Hi, Lauren, John here. I want to commend you first in, we have all these issues in doing a crit where the presentation, you don't normally do board presentations. I don't know if you guys do. We have sort of migrated over into the digital realm and we're doing a lot of that. We rarely do this, but I think using the chalkboard metaphor, even to the detail of tape, I think that's tape in the digital realm, although those look like two pieces of tape in there. But just the idea, right? It's fantastic. The idea that you're embodying the the world that you're working in the presentation. Huge kudos to you for that. Then on top of that, this diagram here of taking program and flipping it into the characterizations of what happens in the space. I mean, the idea that all the program you described in those 1 to 12 items can be divided up into these 6 categories, and you get this heat map of where things happen. I've never seen that before, and I think that's fantastic. I'm sorry, I'm going to steal it from you for my next presentation for a project. All right. Now,
As long as you credit.
well, I don't know. Yes, Lauren. Well, maybe I'll hire her before you do, Adam. So a couple of criticisms, all taken in good stead. Hopefully, you were talking about this. I'm just trying to do the math here, and I think your footprint it's got to be at least 200 by 400 or 500.
Yes.
So you got 100,000 square feet on a floor, and a second floor, and a partial third floor, and on top of that, you've got 100,000 square feet close to in a basement. I mean, I would just ask you, why not lift everything up out of the ground and create, as Rob was just talking about, maybe more of a village aspect or a community aspect? And especially if you're describing what's happening on Georgia Avenue is really bereft of activity. It seems that a lot of this stuff could come out of the ground. You've got a much bigger site too. You've got all this stuff here, south of the circle. That I would think that all that program, 400,000 square feet, we were talking about earlier, could be something that could be really energizing to the community than really putting it all in one thing. Now, I did a community center in Brownsville up in New York, and I'll tell you, my community center, which is one of the largest ones in New York, was only the size of your rotunda and a basketball court. This is incredible amount of program that I think I'm struggling trying to feel, how is it organized? What is the outlook? What's the in look? What are the pathways through? I see, you have a grand stair and a pathway up to the second floor that culminates in the bridge that goes across. And I think that's great. But then how does that fit with this airfoil roof? I'm struggling with, the scale issues. I'm struggling with, is this airport metaphor really appropriate for the neighborhood, which seems to be a bit more, residential and lots of different pieces and parts. And I'm struggling with why are these recreation centers so huge and massive? And I understand. I mean, it's a program that you see a lot being built, but I guess it is not directed to you. but why do we have to build these massive facilities just to get kids a place to be? I mean, why? And oh, you okay? Well, Professor, please enlighten me. Why?
Listen, I think this is a terrific project, and you could sell ice cubes to Eskimos, which is really, and I'm so relieved that the recreation center you chose to pick on was not one that I did in DC. I, I thought she's got one she's picking on. I thought if she shows a second one, I'm really at risk here. But what is nice about what you've done is something. I think the idea is not just kids, but something for everybody. And I think that's really an important part of what these buildings try to be. Because when we've done a few of these, you go to these communities and there was always a tension between young people and the seniors in the community and stuff. And having them, I would encourage a building like this to have more of both and more opportunities. I want to just go back to something that you said, which I think is really quite true. By the way, I love the idea that this is presented as though you just drew it up on a blackboard. It's just very, very, very clever, very clever. And I agree about that diagram. I think the airfoil roof is a problem. And the reason I think it's a problem is it prohibits the idea that you could actually occupy the roof for uses. And I think you could make a building where the stair could end up leading to a place that could have outdoor program spaces on the roof. One of the problems down in this part of the world is that as this DC has moved east and real estate as it has, particularly around Howard and around Shaw, has become much more valued than it ever was, say, 25 years ago. It's worth a lot of money. And so spreading out horizontally is a very difficult thing to do. Buildings have to go vertically. And so you find yourself stacking programs that might normally do otherwise. So I think the airfoil roof would be something I would try not to do so that I could have a sports field up there. And I think one of the challenges of your plan is the front part's nice, the little cut through. I think you need to draw the site plan with Bryant Street as a kind of Noli plan. I had a really hard time trying to figure out where this was, and I know that part of the world very well, and I could not figure it out. And then you showed Bryant Street. I thought, okay, I know where it is. But I think if you drew it as a Noli plan, you'd see that maybe there would be a solution that didn't have the public spaces buried on the inside of the building, but maybe we're on the Georgia Avenue side. So a lot of the kind of activity of people coming and going and stairs going up and down could be more visible to the public. I think it's a little bit odd that so much of the Georgia Avenue side has program pieces kind of blocking the view into the building there. And I could have seen a scheme whereby the major circulation ran along Georgia and things were perpendicular to that. It probably would have helped you get back to the courts and things back there, because right now the way you get back to some of those things is a little bit mysterious right now. And so popping the stuff out of the basement and using the roof more would have helped do that, and maybe making, instead of a symmetrical partie divided in the middle with schemes on either program piece on either side, that there was something that engaged Georgia Avenue there. Georgia Avenue is tough there. The sidewalk is very narrow. There's a lot of traffic and things, but having a sort of large space and even a little setback would help. The narrowness of the block, I don't know if you looked at other blocks, did you? Did you? Because this narrow block is a challenge. It's not easy to put stuff in a narrow block, particularly when you have program pieces that are so wide. But really beautifully done and beautifully presented in an enthusiastic and passionate way. And I would be happy, I know people at DPR, I'd be happy to make an introduction for you, and so you could show this to them, and I'm sure they would eat it up like crazy. So congratulations.
Suggest what we're all, I think, talking about, which is the one that says arterial flow. The diagram that says arterial, can you point to it? Yeah. So like a village, as Raul said, so a series of volumes, something that might open up more in Georgia Avenue. I think there's a lot of clues in that little diagram that you could have incorporated more directly into the scheme.
You set the building. So if the sidewalk is very narrow at Georgia Avenue here, you can make it wider.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments. I think it's a beautiful project. And I think in some of the comments about the massing and the scale and the roof are, if you just look at the programming, the colored programming diagram and the plans, they're kind of, they don't appear there because it is broken up like that diagram that Adam just pointed out. And so I wonder if like in the previous discussion, this discussion of structure could have helped, articulate that in the three-dimensional street view and in the section B up at the top. When I look at the plans, it almost reminds me of some of Khan's projects where the articulation of the program was embodied in these kind of forms in the plans, like Rochester and Salk and some of the other projects.
You know, I- one of the things that was interesting when we did the Deanwood Community Center years ago, and one of the things the community said to us was, we want to see each other. We want to go there and we want to see each other and see our neighbors and see the kids and everything. And I think the building runs a little bit of the risk of things being often separate things and the circulation not being and the public spaces not being as clear as they could be. And maybe they are, they're just not drawn in a way that helps me see that. Like one of the great things about old Beaux-Arts buildings was you could always see the figure of the public spaces, the lobbies and the stairs and things like that. And there were real places to meet and stuff. And so when you draw the architecture and gets a little bit to Peter's point about Khan and the structure, in Khan's work, you could always see where those lobbies are and where the public stairs are and things. And the structure reinforces that. So I think that's why I was saying earlier, to make a Noli plan would help you see more the kind of figure of the public spaces and the stairs and things and how they all thread together. Because I look at that ground floor plan and I look at those two little teeny doors that go into the athletic courts and things there, and it just seems kind of unsatisfactory. It just doesn't seem like enough of an event. And if it's done right, those sort of public spaces become the places where the kids see each other and they build up familiarity with each other and therefore become more of a community, which I think is something architecture can uniquely do. Um, I think the last thing I will say is the lower levels are always tough there to make work. I might have tried to find a strategy where I could have had more cutouts to those lower levels, so I could have seen more down into them, and so they would have felt less like, I don't know that you do. I can't see that you do anywhere. Do you anywhere have any cutouts to the lower level where I can see down into those spaces from the first floor? That would help a lot because it would make that stuff seem like it's not so separate and tucked away, and that things going on down there, are okay. You know. Yeah. Just something, right? Something that helps you see down into those spaces. It's always a challenge in architecture to go down rather than go up, but I think it would help this plan a lot.
It's a little smaller than this, but we did it 1,000 years ago. I did it's rec center, it's gym, theater, it's what's it called? The Arc. The Arc. THEARC.
I think the one in DC in Southeast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I visited there.
Smith Company did it, right? Yeah, yeah.
You know that project?
Yeah.
Sorry, nobody was raising their hand. That's where the confusion got in. Okay, I'm going to pass this back to, because we have a big logistical thing to go on here. I think what we're hearing is that this was a spectacular presentation. And we're hearing that the architecture could still rise up further to meet the level of the presentation. But that said, I think you should bring this back to folks in Parks and Recreation in DC. I think you should bring this back to people at Howard University to listen about this kind of stuff, and maybe in other cities nearby, listen to what these folks have to say. But the tradition here is the last word goes to the committee chair.
Thank you very much, Brian. I want to commend Lauren for tremendous work, and I wanted to raise this awkward spectrum that Lauren changed her site and her project sort of over the summer, and to be able to regroup and reconnect and bring it, you personalized it, because the project that you originally started with was in Chicago, and then you were like, no, I'm fighting it. Sorry? Oh, and I think you pivoted and regrouped wonderfully. Yes, anything, there's always time to, an opportunity to do more and more and more and more. And I think that's a positive statement, as opposed to flatlining and saying, well, we've hit a dead wall. I have no more interest to talk about this or hear about this. I think that is true across the board. I want to re-emphasize if I may, the three things that I always took away from this experience with you was that you were trying to bring identity to this community that you were very connected with. You wanted to make it relatable, and we wanted to talk about scale. And scale, we were talking about in previous years where theses were too big to manage. And yes, we can certainly continue to massage that, but I think that's an important thing, is that as an urban response, you were able to bring it down and make it relatable for this community. And it may still be huge, but maybe that community needs huge. And it's something that Terry had brought up with the interior streetscape and the interior space planning and attention to detailing, to be able to allow people to put their stamp, with the murals and whatnot. You allowed the community to put their stamp without, graffitiing aimlessly. And I think that's really powerful. And I really do appreciate and thank you for this opportunity to work with you. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. And if you actually look closely, not only is it a blackboard, but these photographs that don't belong on blackboards have been taped up with Trompe l'oeil tape. I think that I just came up front to see if it was real tape or not. So it's a good trick. We're going to take a little pause because the boards that are over there have to come over here. For our logistics crew, if we could push this back just 1 foot, each of these back 1 foot, and bring those boards and put them across here, it'd be very helpful. Thank you. Yeah. So obviously, had rules for kind of pay attention. Okay, how are you? How did your sit down? Yeah.
When do you, yeah, when do you go? Yeah, try to keep it as close to your mouth as you can.
Okay.
This is better.
Hello? Hello?
Had to. Oh, yeah. That's the key first.
Hello? You can hear me? You can hear me?
Gonna have.
You can hear me? Okay. You can hear me, right?
Barely hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good idea.
Is it that bad?
Just gonna put the volume up.
I have some notes just in case. Mhm. Thank you.
And I'll say some. I get to say some words at the end.
Okay.
Okay, Brian will recognize me.
Oh, okay.
He organizes that.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
it's good.
Okay.
Ready over there? Ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are now moving across the world to Africa, to a housing crisis that's ongoing there. And Tizge Mariana is going to present us her thesis, Shaping Communities. Her committee chair was Ralph Bennett over here. Our other committee member is Juan Burke, who's participating remotely today. So he can hear and see this, and he knows that if he has any questions to ask, he's to text me at that special undisclosed texting number. and of course, I was on the committee as well. Take it away.
Oh, hi everyone. So shaping communities. So Ethiopia is facing housing crisis right now because of the economic pressure and um, income inequalities between the high and low income communities and a rapid migration from different cities to this capital city. And people are moving for jobs, for education, and overall for better opportunities. And the demand for affordable housing is increasing, but they're not having enough solution for everyone. So right now, the solution is becoming a shelter rather than a livable, dignifiable space. So the government is responding two ways. The first one is Kabali housing, which started back in 1975 when the government started taking secondary homes from landlords and giving it back to low-income communities. And then when that wasn't enough, they started doing one-story building where it's a communal setting where they have to share between 7 to 10 families. But these housings are not well kept and doesn't have proper sanitation or like general like waste management system, which is making it hard for people to live in these type of situation. And the other one it came up was after that was Millennium Project, which is the 1090 for 4060 and 2080. And the 1090 project is the one that's catered towards the low-income communities. And the 1090 is referring, you're putting out the 10% and then you can pay the rest, the 90% in time. And even though it's catered towards around low-income communities, it's not really affordable for them. Plus, it's not addressing their cultural and social needs because it's putting them in this vertical setting when they're not familiar with, because every housing they've been in until then is one-story units. And even when they're putting them in this vertical setting, they're not really addressing how they can interact because the country itself is built on togetherness. So not addressing that is a problem. So because it's not affordable and people don't have enough option, they started resorting to informal settlement, which is creating overcrowding. So they settle in form of informal tenants, or they gather their friends, community, and build a house overnight, which is called moon housing. So the 1090 project, some of the design flaws are it only has one accessible point, which is not considering wheelchair or like anybody that is senior that doesn't want to take the stairs. Also, the common area is only the circulation, and they for the 1090 project, the low income project, they don't develop the ground floor, which is the community space. And it's also located at the periphery location, which is making it hard for low-income communities to get to their jobs and even have a proper infrastructure so that they could get to essential needs. So this is making them feel socially isolated when it should be solving the problem. And also they're losing some of the culture because they do everything together, they eat together, they have coffee ceremonies, and there's so many things that they do together. So how do we respond? So affordability shouldn't just be the solution. It should also create a space where it's culturally sensitive and socially integrated. And how we respond to that is by creating a semi-private connection with their neighbors, and where it can be like an outdoor space, and providing green spaces by developing the ground floor. Also, we're responding to the cost by making it modular and prefabricated. And it can be human scale, because one of the other issue that the existing solution had was it's pretty much the same height. And since they're not used to vertical setting, providing a human scale variety of height of building would create like a better integration in the earth. So also it could be collective maintenance, where they can maintain the gardens or any common spaces, and it can be incrementally grown, so they can chip in what they have, and in time they can finish the process. And we're creating green buffers for safety, and also studio units are overlooked in the existing solution, so we're providing a studio apartment as well. So the site itself is located at Discatama, which is not in the periphery. It's about 6 miles away from the central business district, and it's both residential and retail zoning. So you can have souks, which is convenience store, within the lot. It has access to essential needs, and it's near Mercato, which is one of the biggest open market in the continent. And these are some of the essential accesses that are within a walking distance, and it has public transportation within like 4-minute distance. So this makes it a great location. But the other reason the site was chosen is because it already housed informal settlers, but obviously I can't find out which one that is, but it's within this picture. So the existing site has 2 cafes, and the building height is very diverse. So at Discatama's climate, it's very moderate, and since it's a subtropical island, highland country, and it sits at a high elevation, it's pretty much moderate throughout the year. But unless it's like dry season, I mean, but since we're near the equator, there's a lot of solar radiation. And the site itself on the T-zone, since it's accommodating a lot of traffic that's going towards the Mercato, there's going to be a lot of noise on the north end. So this already decides the orientation of the building. So that some of the design principles or regional references are the veranda typology that is already existing in development architecture. It helps with ventilation, and also it can be I guess it can help people engage within that space, or if it's a common area for the units. So what I'm introducing is 3 building types. The first one would be a multi-family unit, where it would house about 48 different units on the lot. And then the multifamily housing base would have a commercial base, where it would have souks on the east end. And then the second phase would be formalizing the moon housing that I've introduced earlier, and making it an incremental building where people can build what they can, and then we provide the shared kitchen and bathroom, since that's the most expensive construction. And then with time, if they can afford to add their own within their unit, then they can take down the shared kitchen and bathroom, and that could be more units for that lot. The third one is introducing a studio apartment. So as you can see on the floor plan, the main access is on the north end. And then once you get in, you'll be able to access the ground floor garden. There's also side entry, and there is existing tertiary path that is on the existing site, which is why there's a space between the moon housing and then the multifamily units. For the moon housing, there's three different unit types within the cluster. There's 4 units within the compound. So, and on the second floor, multifamily housing, which is on the north end, would have 3 different unit types, and the central space would be a common space where people can engage. And pretty much that would be the extension of their living room, because every living room is facing the common space. And that could be like a space where they can have their coffee ceremony, they can eat together, cook together, pretty much engage. And then for the studio units, there's a shared dining room and shared kitchen to make it more affordable for studio tenants, which is not being addressed in the existing condition because they do provide enough space, but they don't provide affordability for studio tenants. So as you can see, that shared space can be used for many things. People back home pray together, eat together, and pretty much do everything together. And for the studio units, there's a rooftop, shaded rooftop, gathering space, and edible garden. So how is this feasible? Because there's an existing condition right now. So on the first phase, we're doing this in phase, and on phase 1, it can house the whole lot in phase 1. And then after everybody's moved, we can do the rest of the phasing. So this is how we're phasing it. First unit would be the first mass of the multifamily unit. And then in phase 1.5, we introduce the other half, which has other 24 units. So the material is wood for the louvers, and concrete is used as both a structure and a finish because that's the most affordable material. So the east end is pretty vibrant and active. As you can see, it has a lot of souks, which is very accessible for the multifamily or even the whole lot. On the west elevation, the west elevation is leading you to the south entry with a shaded canopy, and then there's a public gathering space or public garden for everybody. So the section is showing all the common spaces, the garden for the rooftop, and pretty much how people engage with their neighbors. So in conclusion, a housing shouldn't be fixed, it should be transitional. And this project is pretty much creating an ecosystem where people can transition from renters to owners. And housing shouldn't just be a shelter, it should be a dignifiable living space. Thank you.
Any takers?
I want to commend you in the sense that some of the imagery you have here for the spaces are really beautiful. I mean, some of the perspectives you've showing, you know, the wood in comparison to what we saw earlier, you really have taken the wood framing to heart, and it shows up not only in the spaces but in the screening. I think this is a very evocative image there of the studio apartment rooftop garden with the screen as the full wall. So I'm intrigued. I just kind of want to dive in and I get a sense of feeling of what that space could be. Could I ask in terms of uh, what's the make of the families that are living here? Are they mostly you know, mother, father, children, mother-in-law? I mean, what size families are we typically talking about?
So culturally, like people live with their extended family. That's why I'm providing the incremental housing as a more of an open setting. But for the apartment, it's 1 to 3 bedrooms. So whatever.
Got it. So the idea that maybe somebody starts off in the moon housing in a studio apartment, and then, as you said earlier, maybe they get married, or you know, they move with their mother or father. They move into one of the apartments in the multifamily
Yeah.
units. I think that's interesting. I mean, in my experience in New York, one of the things that developers always want is when they lay out the building layouts is you have a 2 bedroom, but you got to put that junior one right next to it because in many cases, the family that's in that 2 bedroom will want to expand. And as you said, knock down a wall.
Yeah.
It might be interesting to see if you could incorporate that also into the multifamily apartment. In other words, obviously have some studio apartments and the moon apartments. That's great. But is there a way to incorporate that time aspect into the building itself? And, you know, as you said, things will contract or expand depending, but to have that flexibility in place for wherever you are in the unit, just to give that extra, you know, the reflection of how that community interacts, I think would be fascinating to see. Because I don't think you need to do very much. I mean, you see your partial floor plan for multifamily apartments. If that 1 bedroom unit were maybe either a studio or could have flexibility to be attached to the pink one or the green one, or all of them attached all at once, because I think you've set it up with all the public spaces on the public areas. And I think that it would be just very simple to try and add that extra dimension into the planning. But I think you've arranged it beautifully. I think the concept of the units being able to progress all the way through is great. And I said, I mean, I think some of these imagery that you have for the interiors are fantastic and really give me a sense of what it's like to live in the complex.
Okay.
Very nicely presented. Let me ask you a question. Is this is the urbanism here an urbanism of street trees? Is it?
Yeah.
That's a question.
So the T zone is pretty noisy. So on the north end, the trees are there to create a buffer between the primary street and
Here,
yeah.
here.
And then the other one is a walking trail leading you to the south entry, which is
see.
the south,
So this is a kind of a garden walk to this.
the public garden. Yeah.
To the public garden. The and that is open to the public. Is that
Yes.
the way urban space happens here? Is that the way? What am I trying to ask? You know, this is a public garden. Doesn't belong to the community necessarily, but it's open to the streetscape. I guess.
Yes.
I guess I'm looking for, you know, what is the threshold between public street and the private realm? How's it made, and is it is it correct? I don't know how else to say it, you know.
So the reason I placed the green on the east end, the west end,
Yeah.
even in front of the public garden, is because the existing condition doesn't have a sidewalk. So I'm introducing the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So in order
is
to
that
create
typical?
especially for residential units and informal settlements, yes, it
But
doesn't
this-
have,
This is the elevation along there?
yes, I am introducing that.
There?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the south elevation.
Oh, this one. No, it's this.
Yeah, that's,
Okay. I mean, that's a pretty, you know, I'll say tough looking elevation on the
Okay.
ground floor. You know, the ground floor in this kind of urbanism, I guess what I'm imagining, this is tough urbanism. You know, this is like, you know, I've been to, you know, Istanbul and a number of places, not that are exactly like this, but I can imagine this is a tough urbanism that, you know, the street is emphatically public. The building is emphatically private.
yeah.
The streets are tough. They're not necessarily pedestrian friendly, you know, save for, you know, the big commercial street. There's all kinds of activity here,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, opening that and making this commercial frontage and really because the building sits on the site, you know, irregularly relative to its frontage, you know, this could have, you know, real commercial kinds of frontage associated with it. But then I guess I'd expect this street to be, you know, a tough street, you know, and the facade recognizes that.
Yes.
But then this space and this space, I guess I don't have a good mental image of what that space is like, you know, and whether it's the right thing here, whether it belongs to the building or belongs to the street. You're giving it to the street.
Yeah.
Is that the right thing?
I mean, there's no public park within the site, so even just providing one green space for the site where they can gather and not use the vehicle path as a gathering area
Yeah.
is something I was considering when I was laying that out.
Interesting. Yeah. No. Well, I guess a couple of things. I mean, this looks like it belongs to the building, but it's really a public park, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And this leads you from the commercial street back to the public park. No, you know, I don't know. Because you can imagine a scenario where that is enclosed and it belongs to the moon units, you know. But I don't know.
I mean, there is a garden for the moon housing already. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's very well drawn. I think that has been has said very well drawn, and I like it. You know, I mean, I think this would be very nice. This would be very nice. You know, I think commercial here. I guess I want a tougher edge here. You know, just a straighter edge. You put a bump on it. I'm not quite sure what that is. But I wish you had done more with the space here that would allow us to know what you were thinking about and how these commercial spaces, you know, related to the street. But that's really it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is beautifully drawn, what you've drawn, and maybe my comment will respond to some of the questions Rob is raising. The things I love about your project are the variety of housing that you've solved within the block, and you've given presence to the communal aspects of the block, especially in the two larger end rooms of the tallest building. So the one thing that I think you might consider is those beautiful elevations of the entire block. If they were to extend to across the street, even that kind of primary street that shows up in the figure ground site plan, or to the blocks, the similar blocks on the side streets, that would probably answer the questions that Rob is raising about. So I think you've done a wonderful job of kind of creating the interior life and architecture and social situations of the block inside. I think the questions are, how does this fit within the larger urban context at the perimeter, which you would start with a street section that goes all the way through the street. And when I look at again, compare these two plans on the first board and the second board, what's interesting that Rob pointed out is the block is not a perfect rectangle, right? The north edge and the west edge are
No.
deformed,
Yeah.
right? And so I wonder if maybe the buildings are orthogonal, but some of that slack was taken up either within those internal courtyards or these external forecourts could give some hierarchy to those spaces. The one question I have about the two rooms that are on each of the upper floors is how are they used in this community and in this culture? Because one is in the middle of the block, and it's going to be much quieter. It's the one that's slightly smaller, right? And the other one is facing out onto that main street,
Yes.
right? And so that's a question I have. And one more thing I like about what you've done is because you've put in those elevations, the peak, that gable form over that space, it gives presence to that community
Yeah.
room with the architectural language that you're using.
So the two different so the north and the south end is connected with a bridge. So any of the space can be used how they want. So each space is not defined for one thing, but it's a common space. So right now it's being used as a coffee ceremony area where people can gather and drink together and catch up with their neighbors.
I wanted to
Yeah.
compliment you as well. I think that based on the problem that you described, you've seemed to have solved a massive, dearth of housing in your community. And I hope that you get an opportunity to present it to your public leaders, and so that they can, have a perspective from a resident that is pure and connected directly to the community. And similar to what we were hearing at the previous presentation, but the fact that you have so coherently summarized what the challenges are and then provided a very viable solution is something that public leaders are always enriched by hearing directly from the community and seeing a solution that so thoroughly addresses the needs. So I hope that opportunity is presented to you, and that you can take it. I agree with one of the first comments that was even more integration. If you were to be able to continue to work on this project, integrating the different types of residents so that a studio apartment is next door to a family apartment is just even more of an integrated community that can really, I could see some serious benefits there.
Yeah.
Although at the same time, I understand why you have zoned things because some of them have shared amenities.
Yeah.
And so proximity to that is of course important too. So it's a bit of a challenge to achieve that integration. One of the spaces that I'm most intrigued by is the Moonhouse Garden and especially the multifamily apartment courtyard garden.
Mhm.
And you mentioned a number of times about the challenge of the vertical, it's not typical and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily embraced. However, to get the quantity that you need, you're sort of forced into that solution.
Yeah.
So that really raises the question about the proportions of the courtyard
Mhm.
garden. And when you have so many levels of your multifamily apartment,
Mhm.
the question is, how can you ensure that the proportion of that space still feels welcoming and comfortable to people who are not as accustomed to tall buildings,
Mhm.
right? And so you're of course limited by your site, but at the narrowness of the courtyard garden, so then I become really interested in the layers between the wall of the courtyard garden and the wall of the private residence and what is happening in that zone. I really appreciate the language, as other jurors have also said, the language of wood and the screening.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering if there are more opportunities to interrupt that on the courtyard garden wall and to create a semi-private layer there that is still a place for community gathering. But perhaps it's a step in between the private residence and the public gathering. So in this rendering right here,
Yeah.
that corridor right there where it's the wall or the wall,
Mhm.
what if there were a personalizable, that's a word, customizable zone there that enabled smaller gatherings? And I don't know if that's part of the culture to have these smaller conversation areas or gardens that are not within the home, but not within the, the many people gathering space. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that it could be more zoned to the private residences or more, it's akin to in Baltimore and probably other cities, but in Baltimore and Locust Point, in the community where our offices are, it's a strong row home tradition.
Yeah.
And the in Locust Point especially, there are always two chairs on the sidewalk next to the stoop, right? So it's all very personalized. So when you walk by the home, you see the type of chairs they've chosen, the container plants they might have, flags or other decor that they might choose.
Mhm.
And it really is an invitation to the community to engage with the residents. They just sit there next to the sidewalk and someone can stop and join them.
Yeah.
And I wonder what the equivalent would be here, right?
Yeah.
And, maybe it's in that zone right there. And if that were just a little wider or, there was a niche cut into the private residence wall. And so just something to think about. And then I think that could really soften the edge of the courtyard garden wall and create more of a layered feeling to that wall instead, which changes the perception of the proportion of that very tall space. But just returning to the original compliment on recognizing the challenge and coming up with this viable solution to address housing in a way that is so responsive to the community. So my congratulations to you.
Thank you.
How do we know, this is coming from one of the other comments. I guess I didn't fully realize how much communal space there was. how do you explain to us, or how do you get a handle on how much communal space there is?
Needed
Because
or
how much is needed, and how much is right, you know? Because there's an enormous amount of communal space
Yeah.
from our perception, right? Is this the right amount of communal space?
So if I show you some of the gathering spaces, are everything is pretty big and
Right, but
set in that.
this is 3, 6, 9, that's 12 units. And that's that space and that space for the 12 units. And
Yeah.
that happens twice. And then there's all of this.
Mhm.
These are shops, right?
Yes.
But there's all of this. You would squeeze a lot of that out of that. Right. Is that the right amount? I guess I'm just asking the question.
So I wanted to provide enough options for everyone, even when on the ground floor, there is a multi-purpose event space where people can gather like in a small setting.
Yeah.
And it's facing the public garden. And even though it seems a lot, since even if they provided like the ground floor, it's not like the ground floor, sorry, for the 1090 units, which is the beginning. It's never developed. It's never considered. So I don't think that's a lot. Mhm. Yeah.
And then just one more. What is the character of this street versus the character of this street?
Yeah.
Because this all have shops on it,
Mhm.
but this you're making an overt um, motif
Yeah.
to make this a public walkway,
Yeah.
you know, to connect to a public garden. And you don't make the same effort on this wall that you made on this wall to be extroverted to that, you know, to make this comfortable. And seems, you know, there's this is a very public gesture, and yet the wall is a very private gesture.
Yes.
And is there some discrepancy there?
So the reason it's a walkway, or like a walking trail on the west end, is because the other lot is a residential unit. On the other end, it's a commercial. Like the souks are facing a commercial unit. So having that type of crowd within the west elevation wouldn't be the best decision.
It just makes me ask a question that I probably should have asked during the process.
Mhm.
What is the major religion?
So there's no major religion,
Okay.
but mostly a different type of denomination of Christian or Islam.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking back to in Islamic architecture,
Mhm.
the courtyard space is usually very heavily protected by the periphery of the building,
Yes.
such that you don't get moments like this where you could stand here and see into there.
Yeah.
There's always a disconnect, a kind of series of vestibules that you go into.
Mhm.
When Rob was talking earlier about the mean streets, to me, this street here seems to be the meanest of them all. And in part, you know, if you look up in here, it doesn't seem to be as mean as it is where you're located. And in part, it seems to me what's made it mean is buildings from the 20th century that couldn't agree on where the edge of the street was. And so that some of them align like this, some of them align like that. Maybe there's no way to kind of compensate for that, but it just sort of strikes me as that edge up there could have been helpful. It could have aligned more with the street. It could have built a sense of public realm, private realm more clearly. The other thing that strikes me is that there's big, medium, and really tiny
Yes.
going on. And I'm just sort of wondering, I agree with this, with what Terry said about really the aspect ratio of that courtyard at the moment. It's a little bit better than it was before. Remember, we had a toaster before where you could put a piece of toast in it. And it was really tall and narrow and whatnot. It's gotten better, but I'm wondering if some of that program could be decanted and spread into that area there to make a little bit better proportion for that courtyard space. And then the last thing is I would do is I'd ask myself, is there a way to make this pristine geometry of the plan, which is very well thought out. Is there a way to put some fabric softener in it to relax a little bit so that there's some poche or something that recognizes the needs of the urban and public realm versus the needs of the private realm? And acts as a kind of rapprochement between the two. But that's something you can think about in later life. Professor Bennett, do you want to stand and deliver here?
I first met CJ last March, and she and I have like this. And we've met together weekly since then. And I've learned, I think, way more than CJ has about the difference, and you've hit on it right away, the difference, the looseness of family structure in Ethiopia. The fact that she is providing 3 prototypes, which can be used in stages, and blocks can have all 3 types if it's appropriate. And the smallest one, the Moon House, is the most illustrative of the fact that this is meant to be a building which offers a transition between ownership and rental. There is an owner of that complex, but with that owner live other families and other individuals who are paying rent until the point where they can build a house like that. And of course, what's stunning about the urban site here is that the vast majority of it are 1-story self-built buildings. And so what she's offering is a type which continues that possibility, but offers alternatives as well with types that we can see more clearly. And the amount of common space is enormous. And she, in her critique of the buildings that are being provided, showed that there is no common space and I've done a good many low-income multifamily buildings where common space had to be eked out at the floors and always happened on the ground floor, so that social life occurred through an elevator. And this is not the case here. There is a great deal of common space into which the traditions of family life and community life can occur. So the net to gross area is preposterous by American standards, but may provide a possibility for communities like occur in Ethiopia. So I'm deeply grateful to have been involved with your project. It's been really a very interesting experience, and I hope that you'll be able to realize some of this at your home. Thank you for the experience.
Thank you.
So everybody, thank you so very much. And thank you, CK. That was really good job. This afternoon, we're going to take a little break now for lunch. We're going to need to have Dainty, then Byron, and then Amori, and then Abigail, so that we can switch these out. So a lot of these got to move around because none of this stuff can move. So whoever put those there, help move those to those locations. We'll try to simplify things for this afternoon. Faculty and guests, welcome you upstairs for lunch in the Dean's Conference Room. And students, try to get us there so that at 2 p.m. we're ready to go with round 2. Thank you.